Captain Lisa Grant stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching something she had never seen before. Through the main screen, two alien fleets moved toward each other in perfect formation. The ships glided through space like dancers preparing for an elegant show. "Jake, are you recording this?" she asked her tactical officer. Commander Jake Sullivan nodded, his fingers moving across his console. "Every second, Captain. Earth Command is going to want to see this." The battle they were watching was nothing like human warfare. The crystalline ships of the Vorthic Empire moved in smooth lines, their hulls catching starlight and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. Across from them, the energy-based vessels of the Nexari Federation pulsed with soft blue light, their forms shifting like living things made of pure power. Dr. Amy Roberts, the ship's science officer, joined them at the main screen. She had been studying alien cultures for 10 years, but this was her first time seeing actual combat between the major galactic powers. "Look at how they're positioning themselves," she said with wonder in her voice. "It's like they're following a script," and they were. As the human crew watched, the Vorthic fleet sent a formal message to the Nexari ships. The translation appeared on their screens in neat, polite words. "Greetings, warriors of the Nexari Federation. We, the Third Crystal Fleet of the Vorthic Empire, challenge you for control of the mining rights to Kepler 442b. We propose combat under the ancient rules, with honor to the victor and mercy to the defeated." The Nexari response came quickly, equally formal and courteous. "We accept your challenge, Crystal Singers. May both our fleets fight with skill and withdraw with dignity when the contest is decided." Jake Sullivan shook his head in disbelief. "They're actually asking permission to fight each other." "It gets stranger," Dr. Roberts said, checking her cultural database. "According to my research, they'll now spend the next hour setting up the battle conditions. They have to agree on weapon strength, target priorities, and rescue protocols for damaged ships." Captain Grant had fought in the Mars colonial wars and the Belt pirate conflicts. She had seen ships torn apart by railgun fire and watched crews die in the cold vacuum of space. This alien approach to warfare seemed almost impossible to believe. The negotiations continued for exactly 1 hour, just as Dr. Roberts had predicted. Both fleets moved into predetermined positions, spacing their ships out in neat formations that would give everyone a clear field of fire. No one tried to hide behind asteroids or use the planet's gravity to gain an advantage. When the battle finally began, it was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Vorthic ships fired beams of focused crystal energy that sparkled like gems. In the darkness, the Nexari vessels responded with waves of pure force that rippled through space like water. When the weapons hit their targets, they damaged specific systems without destroying the ships completely. "Their weapons are designed to disable, not destroy," Jake observed, studying his tactical readings. "Those energy beams are knocking out engines and weapon systems, but they're not trying to kill the crews." A Vorthic cruiser took several hits and began drifting, its crystal hull cracked but still intact. Immediately, a Nexari rescue ship broke formation and moved toward the damaged vessel. The Vorthic ships held their fire, allowing the rescue to proceed without interference. "Unbelievable," Captain Grant muttered. "They're helping each other in the middle of a battle." Dr. Roberts was taking notes as fast as she could type. "This is how they've fought for thousands of years. When their civilizations were young, they nearly destroyed themselves in total wars. The survivors learned to fight without destroying, to compete without committing genocide. The battle continued for 3 more hours, following patterns that seemed choreographed. Ships would engage, take damage, and withdraw when their systems were sufficiently disabled. Crews were rescued by both sides equally. No one fired on helpless targets or tried to finish off damaged enemies. As the humans Watched, they began to understand the alien mindset. This wasn't just warfare. It was a form of art, a way of settling disputes that preserved both honor and life. The strongest fleet would win, but no one would die unnecessarily, and the losing side would be treated with respect. It's actually quite civilized, Dr. Roberts said. They've turned warfare into a competition instead of slaughter. But Captain Grant felt uneasy. Her military training told her that real enemies wouldn't follow these rules. Real threats wouldn't care about honor or mercy or ancient protocols. She had seen what happened when civilized people faced truly savage opponents. The battle was entering its final phase when the long-range sensors began screaming warnings. Jake Sullivan's face went pale as he read the incoming data. Captain, we've got multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace. Big ones. The main screen shifted to show the new arrivals. These ships were different from the elegant Vorthic vessels or the graceful Nexari forms. They were brutal, ugly things covered in crude armor and bristling with weapons that looked designed for one purpose: killing. Those are Krell ships, Dr. Roberts said, her voice tight with worry. But not the modern Krell. Those markings. Those are Harthok clan symbols. They're supposed to be extinct. The new ships didn't send polite messages or request formal combat. They didn't position themselves according to ancient rules or wait for negotiations. They simply opened fire with everything they had. The first Vorthic ship to be hit exploded. Instantly. Its beautiful crystal hull shattered into 1,000,000 pieces, taking its entire crew with it. The elegant dance of civilized warfare turned into a nightmare of destruction and death. The Harthok weapons were designed to kill, not disable. They used kinetic projectiles that punched through hulls like paper. They fired explosive warheads that vaporized entire ship sections. They launched chemical weapons that ate through both crystal and energy barriers. Admiral Rex Coleman of the Vorthic Fleet tried to establish communication with the attackers. His ship broadcast the traditional greeting in dozens of languages, requesting the ancient courtesies of war. The Harthok response was a concentrated barrage that turned his flagship into burning. Wreckage Dock Captain Nina Walsh of the Nexari Federation watched her energy-based allies struggle against weapons that seemed designed specifically to counter their defenses. Her own ship, the Luminous Dawn, shuddered under impacts that should have been impossible under the normal rules of engagement. The civilized species found themselves helpless. Their weapons were calibrated for honor duels, not survival. Their tactics assumed enemies who would show mercy and follow rules. The Harthok did none of these things. Through it all, the USS Defiance remained hidden at the edge of the system, recording everything. Captain Grant realized she was watching the end of an era. The galaxy's civilized approach to warfare was about to be tested by enemies who still understood war as humanity did, as a fight for survival where only victory mattered. Captain, Jake Sullivan said quietly, we're receiving distress calls from both fleets. They're requesting immediate assistance under the Mutual Defense Treaty. Captain Grant looked at the slaughter unfolding on her screen. Ships that had been fighting an elegant dance of honor just minutes before were now burning and dying under the savage assault of an enemy that knew no mercy. She made her decision quickly. Open a channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha transmission. The communication officer nodded. Channel open, Captain. Earth Command, this is Captain Grant of the USS Defiance. The situation at Kepler 442b has changed. The civilized galaxy is under attack by forces that don't follow the established rules of warfare. Request immediate military assistance. Send everything you have. She paused, watching another Vorthic ship die in silent fire. The screaming started 3 minutes after the Harthok ships opened fire. Not from the human bridge of the USS Defiance, but from the dying Vothic and Nexari vessels caught in the savage assault. Their communication channels filled with sounds no civilized being had heard in warfare for over 1,000 years. The sounds of crews facing violent death. Captain Lisa Grant watched the tactical display as red icons, representing destroyed ships, multiplied faster than Jake Sullivan could count them. The elegant battle formations that had been so beautiful just moments before were now scattered debris fields mixed with burning hulks and escape pods. "Jake, how many ships have we lost contact with?" she asked. Commander Jake Sullivan's hands moved across his console, his face growing darker with each reading. 17 Vorthic vessels completely destroyed. 23 Nexari ships offline or abandoned. The Harthok aren't taking prisoners, Captain. They're targeting escape pods. Dr. Amy Roberts stepped closer to the main screen, her scientific curiosity overridden by horror. "That's against every galactic warfare convention. You don't attack survivors." "The Harthok never signed those conventions," Jake replied grimly. "According to our database, they were exiled from Krell space centuries ago for refusing to accept civilized warfare protocols." On the screen, a group of Harthok vessels surrounded a damaged Nexari cruiser. The energy being's ship was trying to surrender, broadcasting the ancient signals of defeat that should have guaranteed safe treatment. Instead, the Harthok ships moved closer and began firing at point-blank range. Captain Grant had seen many battles, but nothing like this systematic execution of helpless enemies. The Harthok were not just winning, they were making sure their victory would terrify anyone who might oppose them in the future. New voice crackled through the communication system. It was Admiral Rex Coleman's replacement, a young Vorthic commander whose crystal voice shook with panic and confusion. "Human vessel, this is Acting Admiral Sharp Song of Victory of the Vorthic Third Fleet. We do not understand what is happening. Our weapons cannot penetrate their armor. Our defense screens mean nothing to their weapons. How do we fight enemies who ignore all the rules?" Before Captain Grant could respond, another transmission came through from the Nexari side. Captain Nina Walsh of the Luminous Dawn sounded equally desperate. "USS Defiance, we need help understanding these tactics. They use projectile weapons that move too fast for our energy shields. They fire explosive devices that damage multiple systems at once. Our rescue ships are being destroyed while trying to help survivors. This is not warfare. This is slaughter." Dr. Roberts turned to Captain Grant with wide eyes. "They don't know how to fight a real war. Their entire military doctrine is based on the assumption that enemies will follow civilized rules." Jake Sullivan was monitoring the Harthok communications, running them through the ship's translation computers. What he found made his stomach turn. "Captain, you need to hear this. The Harthok aren't just trying to win this battle. Their leader is broadcasting instructions to capture any high-ranking prisoners for something called the Teaching of Fear. They plan to torture enemy commanders and broadcast it to their home worlds." Captain Grant felt the familiar cold anger that had served her well during the pirate wars. These Harthok were not just enemies. They were the kind of savages that civilized beings had to face occasionally, the ones who reminded everyone why military forces existed in the first place. The tactical display showed the Harthok fleet reorganizing after their initial assault. Instead of the scattered attack pattern they had used to break the civilized formations, they were now moving into hunting groups designed to track down and destroy every surviving enemy vessel. They're not going to stop, Captain Grant realized. They're going to hunt down every single ship. A new group of contacts appeared on the long-range sensors. More Harthok vessels were arriving, these ones larger and even more heavily armed than the first wave. Dr. Roberts checked her xenobiology database and went pale. "Captain, those are Harthok breeding ships. They're not just here to win a battle. They're here to establish a permanent presence. They plan to use this system as a base for expansion. The implications hit everyone on the bridge at the same time. If the Harthok could defeat the combined Vorthik and Nexari fleets this easily, no civilized world would be safe. Their brutal approach to warfare would spread like a plague across the galaxy, destroying the peaceful balance that had lasted for thousands of years. Not another distress call came through, this one from a Vorthik supply ship that had been trying to evacuate civilian miners from the planet below. The ship's crystal-voiced captain was broadcasting a surrender signal, offering to transfer all civilians to Harthok custody in exchange for safe passage. Captain Grant and her crew watched in sick fascination as the Harthok response came back, not in words, but in weapons fire that turned the supply ship and its helpless cargo into expanding clouds of superheated gas. They killed civilians, Dr. Roberts whispered. Non-combatants. That's not warfare. That's genocide. Jake Sullivan was receiving more tactical data from the surviving ships. Captain, the Vorthik and Nexari commanders are requesting a joint planning session. They want to coordinate the remaining forces for a final stand. Set it up, Captain. Grant ordered. Conference room 2. And Jake, start preparing detailed reports on Harthok tactics and weapons. Earth Command is going to need everything we can give them. The holographic conference began 20 minutes later. Acting Admiral Sharp Song of Victory appeared as a tall, elegant figure made of living crystal, his internal light dim with exhaustion and grief. Captain Nenia Walsh materialized as a shifting form of golden energy. Her usual brightness flickered. With stress, human Captain Grant, Sharp Song of Victory began, his voice carrying harmonics of desperation. We must ask for your military assistance. Our fleets are scattered, our tactics proven useless against enemies who do not fight with honor. We invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty signed between our peoples. Captain Nenia Walsh's energy form pulsed with agreement. The Nexari Federation formally requests human intervention. We have never faced warfare like this. Our weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. Our ships are built for elegant combat, not survival against brutal assault. Captain Grant looked at both alien commanders and realized they were facing something their civilizations had forgotten how to handle. They had evolved beyond the savage realities of total warfare, creating beautiful military traditions that worked perfectly as long as everyone followed the same rules. I've already contacted Earth Command, she told them. But I need you to understand something. Human military doctrine is not based on honor or elegance. We learned to fight by facing enemies who wanted to exterminate us completely. If we help, you will use methods that might shock you. Sharp Song of Victory's crystal form brightened slightly. At this point, Captain Grant, we are willing to learn any methods that will help us survive. The conference was interrupted by alarms from the Defiance's sensor array. Jake Sullivan's voice came over the intercom with urgent news. Captain, long range. Sensors are detecting a massive hyperspace signature approaching. Something big is coming out of jump space in 30 minutes. Dr. Roberts checked her instruments and found readings that made no sense. The energy signature is enormous. Whatever's coming is larger than anything in the Harthok fleet we've seen so far. Captain Grant ended the conference quickly. Admiral Sharp Song of Victory. Captain Walsh, prepare your remaining ships for possible evacuation. If that incoming signature is what I think it is, this battle is about to get much worse. As the alien commanders signed off, Captain Grant turned to her crew. Jake, send another message to Earth Command. Tell them the situation has escalated beyond local conflict. We're looking at potential galactic war, and the civilized species have no idea how to fight it. She looked at the main screen, where Harthok ships continued their methodical destruction of everything that moved. Tell Earth Command to send the vengeance. It's time to show this galaxy what real warfare looks like. The message from Captain Lisa Grant reached Earth Command at exactly 0347 hours, Pacific Standard Time. Fleet Admiral Ben Parker was drinking his morning coffee when the priority alert screamed across his personal communication device. By the time he finished reading the tactical report from the Kepler system, his coffee had gone cold. Admiral Parker had fought in more wars than most people could remember. The Martian rebellions, where colonists used mining equipment as weapons, against Earth forces. The Europa mining wars, when corporate armies battled over ice deposits in the outer system. The Belt pirate conflicts that had lasted for 7 brutal years. He knew what real warfare looked like, and he recognized it in Captain Grant's report. Within 20 minutes, Parker had called an emergency meeting of the Joint Chiefs. The war room aboard Olympus Station filled quickly with the highest ranking officers in human space. General Kate Morgan arrived first, her Marine Corps uniform crisp despite the early hour. Admiral Chris Bailey from the Space Navy came next, followed by Dr. Paul Harris from military intelligence. The holographic display in the center of the room showed the current situation at Kepler 442b. Red icons marked destroyed alien ships, while amber ones indicated vessels that were damaged or fleeing. The blue triangles representing Harthok forces seemed to be everywhere at once. "How bad is it?" General Morgan asked, studying the tactical display. Admiral Parker activated the recording from Captain Grant's ship. The room fell silent as they watched elegant alien vessels being systematically destroyed by enemies who showed no mercy. The contrast between civilized warfare and savage brutality was clear to everyone present. "They don't know how to fight a real war," Dr. Harris said after the recording ended. "Look at their ship designs, their formations, their weapon systems. Everything is built for the kind of ceremonial combat they've been practicing for thousands of years." Admiral Bailey leaned forward in his chair. "What about these Harthok? Our database shows them as extinct." Dr. Harris called up detailed files on his personal display. "Apparently not. Intelligence suggests they've been hiding in the outer rim for centuries, building up their forces while the civilized galaxy forgot how to fight real wars. They use kinetic weapons, biological warfare, chemical attacks, and psychological terror tactics." General Morgan nodded grimly. "Old-school warfare. The kind we used to fight before we got civilized ourselves." Admiral Parker stood up and walked to the main display. "The question is what we do about it. Our treaty obligations require us to assist the Vorthik and Nexari, but our standard diplomatic vessels aren't equipped for this kind of conflict." "Send the Vengeance," Admiral Bailey said immediately. "She's the only ship we have that was built for real warfare." The USS Vengeance was humanity's most advanced battleship, though few people outside the military knew it existed. While Earth's diplomatic corps showed the galaxy elegant exploration vessels and peaceful research ships. The Vengeance represented what humans could build when they needed to win wars instead of make friends. Admiral Parker activated his secure communication system. "Get me Captain Dan Foster." The holographic image of Captain Foster appeared within seconds. Foster was a compact man with gray hair and scars on his hands from close-quarters combat. He had earned his reputation fighting corporate militias in the asteroid belt and hunting pirates in the Outer Rim territories. "Admiral," Foster said simply, "I assume this is about the Kepler situation." "It is." "How quickly can you get the Vengeance ready for combat deployment?" Foster didn't hesitate. 6 hours for full combat readiness. "My crew has been running combat drills since we got the first reports." Admiral Parker felt a moment of satisfaction. Foster's crew included some of the best combat veterans in human space. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Brooks had fought in the Titan insurgency, where Earth forces learned how to fight in low gravity against enemies using civilian infrastructure as cover. Commander Steve Clark had survived the siege of Ceres, a 3-month battle where no quarter was asked or given. Weapons Officer Tony Martinez had developed the kinetic bombardment strategies that finally ended the Belt pirate threat. "What's our mission profile?" Foster asked. General Morgan answered before Admiral Parker could speak. "Total warfare, Captain. The enemy doesn't take prisoners, doesn't follow civilized rules, and doesn't care about civilian casualties. Your job is to stop them by any means necessary." Foster's expression didn't change, but everyone in the room could see the shift in his posture. He was no longer just a ship captain. He was a weapon that had just been pointed at a target. "Understood?" "General, rules of engagement?" Admiral Parker looked around the room at his fellow officers. They all knew what had to be said, even if none of them wanted to say it. "Whatever works, Captain. The civilized galaxy is about to learn what happens when honor meets necessity." Foster nodded and signed off. Within minutes, the Vengeance was preparing for immediate departure from its hidden base in the Centauri system. The ship's crew worked with the efficiency that came from years of training. For exactly this kind of mission, Dr. Harris pulled up detailed psychological profiles of the Harthok leadership. Captain Foster should know what he's facing. These aren't regular soldiers following orders. The Harthok culture is built around dominance through violence. They literally cannot understand concepts like mercy or surrender. To them, any enemy that shows weakness deserves to be destroyed. Admiral Bailey was reviewing the technical specifications of Harthok ships. Their vessels are built like flying fortresses. Heavy armor, redundant systems, weapons designed for maximum destruction. They're not elegant, but they're effective. Good thing the Vengeance was designed by people who understand that elegance doesn't win wars. General Morgan replied. Foster's ship has more firepower than most entire fleets. The Vengeance launched from Centauri base exactly 6 hours after the order was given. As it jumped to hyperspace, Admiral Parker sent a classified message to Captain Foster. The message contained detailed intelligence reports, tactical assessments, and one final piece of information that made Foster smile grimly. Earth Command had been wondering for decades how human military technology would compare to the established galactic powers in real combat. The Harthok crisis would provide that answer. One way or another, as the Vengeance traveled through hyperspace toward the Kepler system, its crew prepared for the kind of battle their species had been fighting for thousands of years. They checked weapon systems designed to destroy rather than disable. They reviewed tactics that prioritized survival over honor. They prepared medical facilities for the kind of casualties that civilized warfare never produced. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks conducted final briefings with her Marine detachment. These weren't ceremonial guards or diplomatic escorts. They were combat veterans trained to fight in every environment from vacuum to dense atmosphere. Their equipment included weapons that had been banned by most civilized species as unnecessarily brutal. Commander Clark ran diagnostics on the ship's defensive systems. Unlike the elegant energy shields favored by alien vessels, human defensive technology emphasized damage absorption and redundancy. The Vengeance could take enormous punishment and keep fighting, because humans had learned long ago that pretty ships didn't win ugly wars. Officer Martinez made final calibrations to the ship's offensive systems. Railguns that could punch through armor like paper. Fusion missiles that vaporized entire ship sections. Point defense systems that created walls of destructive energy. Every weapon on the ship was designed with one purpose: to kill enemies as efficiently as possible. As the Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system, its sensors immediately detected the ongoing slaughter. Harthok ships were still hunting down survivors, still ignoring surrender signals, still targeting civilian vessels and rescue craft. Captain Foster stood on his bridge and looked at the tactical display showing the destruction of civilized warfare. His crew waited for orders, their hands ready on weapons that could change the balance of galactic power forever. "All stations, this is the captain," Foster announced over the ship's communication system. "We are about to engage enemies who fight without honor, show no mercy, and take no prisoners. They have forgotten that humans learned to fight wars like this long before we learned to fight them any other way." He paused, watching another alien ship die on his screens. "Let's remind them why that was a mistake." The USS Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace to find hell waiting in the Kepler system. Captain Dan Foster stood on his bridge and watched the tactical display fill with debris fields that had once been ships. Broken hulls drifted through space, alongside frozen bodies and scattered equipment. The elegant formations he had seen in the recordings were gone, replaced by a scattered mess of destruction. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Colonel Mary Brooks, staring at the main screen. "How many ships did they lose?" Commander Steve Clark ran the numbers through his tactical computer. 43 Vorthic vessels destroyed completely. 37 Nexaray ships either destroyed or abandoned. The survivors are scattered across the system, most of them running for the hyperspace jump points. Captain Foster watched a group of Harthok ships pursuing a damaged Vorthic cruiser. The alien vessel was broadcasting surrender signals in dozens of languages, but the Harthok simply moved closer and opened fire with weapons designed to cause maximum destruction. The crystalline ship exploded in a shower of beautiful, deadly fragments. "They're not taking prisoners," Weapons Officer Tony Martinez observed. "They're hunting down everything that moves." Dr. Amy Roberts' voice came over the communication system from the USS Defiance, still hidden at the edge of the system. "Captain Foster, this is Dr. Roberts. I've been monitoring Harthok communications. They're not just trying to win this battle, they're trying to send a message to the entire galaxy. Every ship they destroy, every crew they kill, is meant to terrorize other civilized species into submission." Foster nodded grimly. He had seen this kind of psychological warfare before, during the corporate wars when mining companies used brutal tactics to discourage resistance. The difference was that those conflicts had been limited to small sectors of human space. This was happening on a galactic scale. "Communications, get me Acting Admiral Sharp Song of Victory and Captain Nina Walsh," he ordered. The holographic images of the two alien commanders appeared on his bridge. Both looked exhausted and desperate. Sharp Song of Victory's crystal form was dim with grief, while Captain Walsh's energy body flickered with stress and fear. "Human Captain Foster," Sharp Song of Victory began, his harmonic voice carrying notes of desperation. "We are grateful for your arrival, but I must warn you, these enemies use weapons and tactics we have never encountered. Our shields mean nothing to their projectile weapons. Our defensive systems cannot stop their explosive devices." Captain Walsh's energy form pulsed with agreement. "They target our rescue ships, Captain. They fire on medical vessels. They ignore all the civilized conventions of warfare. How do we fight enemies who have no honor?" Foster looked at both commanders and realized they were asking the wrong question. They were still thinking like civilized beings facing an unfortunate misunderstanding, not like soldiers facing an enemy that wanted to exterminate them completely. "You don't fight them with honor," he said simply. "You fight them to win." Before either alien commander could ask what he meant, the Vengeance's sensors detected a new group of contacts. 6 Harthok ships had broken off from the main fleet and were moving to intercept the human battleship. They were broadcasting something that the translation computers rendered as a mixture of threats and challenges. "They want to see what we're made of," Foster realized. "All stations, battle stations, this is not a drill. The bridge of the Vengeance transformed as combat systems came online. Red lights replaced the normal white ones. Blast shields dropped over the viewports. The tactical displays showed weapon systems, charging and defensive fields activating. Foster watched the approaching Harthok ships and felt the familiar calm that came before combat. These enemies had terrorized the civilized galaxy because they faced opponents who fought with elegant rules and ancient traditions. They were about to learn what happened when they faced an enemy that still remembered how to fight dirty. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks, are your Marines ready? Locked and loaded, Captain. We're prepared for boarding actions if necessary. Commander Clark, defensive systems? All systems green, Captain. Ablative armor is charged. Reactive plates are armed. Point defense systems are active. Martinez, weapons status? Railguns loaded and ready, Captain. Fusion missiles armed. Point defense cannons are tracking multiple targets. The first Harthok ship opened fire at maximum range, launching kinetic projectiles that would have punched through the elegant shields of a civilized vessel. The Vengeance's defensive systems responded automatically. Ablative armor absorbed the impact, burning away in controlled layers to dissipate the kinetic energy. Reactive plates detonated to deflect projectiles that got through the first layer of defense. The alien commanders watching from their ships had never seen defensive systems like these. Instead of trying to stop attacks completely, human technology was designed to absorb punishment and keep fighting. Return fire, Foster ordered. The Vengeance's railguns spoke with the voice of controlled thunder. Projectiles accelerated too. Significant percentages of light speed crossed the distance between ships in seconds. The lead Harthok vessel took 3 direct hits to its armored hull before its crew realized what was happening. The first projectile punched through the ship's front armor like it was made of paper. The second hit destroyed the bridge and command systems. The third penetrated to the engine compartment and caused a catastrophic explosion that vaporized the entire rear section of the ship. The remaining Harthok ships responded with everything they had: kinetic weapons, explosive missiles, and chemical warheads all targeted the human battleship. Foster watched the incoming fire on his tactical display and felt proud of his crew's preparation. "All hands, brace for impact," he announced. The Harthok weapons hit the Vengeance like a hammer blow. Ablative armor burned away under the assault. Reactive plates exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Emergency alerts sounded as minor systems. Failed and backup systems automatically engaged, but the ship kept fighting. Commander Clark coordinated damage control with the efficiency that came from years of training. Hull breach on Deck 7, sealed. Backup power to weapon systems. All major systems operational. The alien commanders watched in amazement as the human ship absorbed damage that would have destroyed any civilized vessel and continued to return fire. The Vengeance's weapon systems operated with mechanical precision, targeting weak points in Harthok armor and exploiting every tactical advantage. Martinez unleashed the ship's full offensive capability. Railgun projectiles tore through enemy ULLs. Fusion missiles vaporized entire ship sections. Point defense systems created walls of destructive energy that no projectile could penetrate. One by one, the Harthok ships died. Not the elegant, honorable deaths that civilized species accepted when their vessels were disabled, but the violent, explosive deaths that came when enemies fought to exterminate each other completely. The last Harthok ship tried to ram the Vengeance, its crew choosing to die in a final act of defiance rather than retreat. Foster ordered all weapons to focus fire on the approaching vessel. A combined barrage tore the enemy ship apart before it could close to ramming distance. Silence fell over the battlefield. For the first time in hours, no weapons were firing in the Kepler system. The surviving Vorthik and Nexary ships watched in stunned amazement as the human battleship sat motionless among the wreckage of its enemies. Captain Foster, sharp song of victory's voice came over the communication system, filled with something that might have been awe. Your ship. It absorbed damage that should have destroyed it. Your weapons. They killed enemies that our most powerful fleet could not stop. How is this possible? Foster looked at the debris field around his ship and felt the weight of what had just happened. The civilized galaxy had just seen something they thought they had evolved beyond. Warfare as an art of destruction rather than a dance of honor. We never forgot how to fight wars that matter, he said simply, but even as he spoke, his long-range sensors were detecting new contacts approaching the system. The main Harthok fleet was coming, and it was much larger than anything they had faced so far. The main Harthok fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts. Captain Dan Foster watched his tactical display fill with red contacts as ship after ship materialized in the Kepler system. 67 vessels of various sizes, all bristling with weapons and armor designed for one purpose: complete destruction of everything they encountered. Dot at the center of the fleet was something that made even Foster's experienced crew pause in shock. The Harthok flagship was a massive dreadnought that dwarfed every other ship in the system. Its hull was covered in crude armor plating and weapon mounts that violated every principle of elegant spacecraft design. This was a ship built by creatures who understood that beauty meant nothing if you were dead. Captain, Commander Steve Clark said quietly, that flagship is reading as 12 kilometers long. It's carrying enough firepower to crack a planet. Dr. Amy Roberts' voice came over the communication system from the USS Defiance. Captain Foster, we're receiving a transmission from the Harthok flagship. The translation is ... disturbing. The message appeared on Foster's screen in harsh, brutal words that made no attempt at diplomacy or civilization. I am Render of Flesh, commander of the Bone Crusher of Worlds. You have destroyed my advanced scouts. For this insult, I will grind your bones to powder and feed your flesh to my younglings. Face me in single combat if you have the courage of your species. Foster read the challenge twice, then looked around his bridge at his crew. Lieutenant. Colonel Mary Brooks was checking her weapon systems. Weapons Officer Tony Martinez was calculating firing solutions for the entire enemy fleet. Commander Clark was coordinating with damage control teams throughout the ship. Single combat, Foster said aloud. He wants to settle this with a duel between flagships. That's what civilized species would do, Dr. Roberts replied. Honor combat between champions while the fleets watch. Foster smiled grimly. Good thing we're not civilized. Instead of accepting the challenge as the Harthok commander expected, Foster opened communication channels to every surviving ship. In the system, Vorthic vessels hiding behind asteroids. Nexari ships that had been fleeing toward the hyperspace jump points. Even civilian craft that had been trying to escape the slaughter. All ships, this is Captain Foster of the USS Vengeance. We are not fighting this battle according to anyone's rules. We are fighting to win by any means necessary. I need every ship that can still fire weapons to coordinate with my vessel for a combined assault. Acting Admiral Sharp Song of Victory's crystal voice came over the channel first. Captain Foster, it goes against every tradition of warfare. Honor demands single combat when challenged. Honor won't save your civilization, Foster replied. Survival will. Captain Nina Walsh of the Nexari Federation joined the conversation. Our ships are damaged, Captain. Our weapons are calibrated for disabling attacks, not destruction. Then you'll provide support, Foster said. Use your energy barriers to channel enemy movement. Create choke points. Force them to come at us where we want them. For several minutes, the communication channels filled with confused alien voices, trying to understand human tactical concepts. The idea of coordinated fleet actions where ships sacrificed themselves for strategic advantage, was completely foreign to species that had fought individual duels for thousands of years. Lieutenant Colonel Brooks monitored the discussions with growing impatience. Captain, the Harthok fleet is moving into attack formation. We don't have time for a democracy. Foster made the decision that would reshape galactic warfare forever. All ships, follow my lead. If you want to survive, trust human tactics. The Vengeance moved forward, not toward the Harthok flagship as tradition demanded, but toward a cluster of smaller enemy vessels. Foster had studied the tactical display and identified the support ships that kept the enemy fleet supplied and coordinated. Target their logistics, he ordered Martinez. Take out their supply vessels first. The human battleship opened fire on targets that no civilized commander would have considered legitimate. Supply ships, communication vessels, repair craft. All the unglamorous support infrastructure that kept a fleet operational. The Harthok had never faced an enemy that would attack non-combat vessels. One by one, the surviving alien ships began to understand. A damaged Vorthic cruiser emerged from behind an asteroid and targeted a Harthok fuel transport. A Nexari destroyer used its energy weapons to create a barrier that forced enemy fighters into a killing zone where human point defense systems could destroy them efficiently. The Harthok fleet, designed for brutal frontal assault, found itself fighting a completely different kind of battle. Instead of facing honorable single combat, they were being hit from multiple directions by enemies who coordinated their attacks and used every advantage available. Render of Flesh, commander of the Bone Crusher of Worlds, broadcast increasingly. Angry challenges as his fleet took losses from tactics he couldn't understand. His massive flagship began moving toward the center of the battle, its weapons charging for a devastating assault. All ships, scatter formation, Foster ordered. Don't give him a concentrated target. The combined fleet spread out across the system, using asteroids, the planet's gravity well, and the wreckage of earlier battles as cover. The Harthok flagship found itself shooting at shadows, while smaller ships struck at its support vessels and escort craft. The battle turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse that lasted for 3 hours. The Vengeance absorbed enormous punishment, its ablative armor earning away under repeated attacks, but it kept fighting. Human engineering proved superior to Harthok brutality as backup systems. Engaged automatically, and damage control teams worked with practiced efficiency. The end came when Martinez identified a weakness in the enemy flagship's design. The Bone Crusher of Worlds carried so many weapons that its power systems were overloaded. A coordinated attack on its energy distribution network would cause cascading failures throughout the ship. All ships, concentrate fire on the following coordinates. Foster transmitted, sending targeting data to every vessel in the combined fleet. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of ships from different species coordinated a simultaneous attack. Vorthic crystal weapons, Nexari energy beams, and human kinetic projectiles all struck the same target at the same moment. The Harthok flagship's power, GRID, collapsed in a chain reaction that spread throughout the massive vessel. Weapon systems failed, life support shut down, and finally the ship's main reactor went critical. The Bone Crusher of Worlds died in an explosion that lit up the entire system. With their flagship destroyed and their support infrastructure crippled, the remaining Harthok vessels found themselves alone and outnumbered. Some tried to flee toward hyperspace. Others attempted suicidal ramming attacks. None escaped the coordinated pursuit that followed. The battle ended not with elegant surrender and honorable treatment of prisoners, as civilized warfare demanded, but with the complete destruction of an enemy that had shown no mercy and expected none in return. In the aftermath, Captain Foster stood in the Vengeance's observation lounge, looking out at a debris field that contained the remains of over 100 ships. The elegant dance of civilized warfare was over. The galaxy had been reminded that some enemies could only be stopped by force, and some battles could only be won by those willing to fight without limits. Dr. Roberts joined him at the viewport. The Vorthik and Nexari commanders are requesting formal meetings to discuss new military cooperation agreements. They want human advisors to help them reform their fleet doctrines. Foster nodded slowly. They're scared. They realize their entire civilization could have been destroyed by enemies they didn't know how to fight. And now they know we do know how to fight them. Dr. Roberts said quietly. Foster watched the stars and wondered if humanity had just saved galactic civilization or taught it to be as brutal as the species it had evolved beyond. In the distance, human reinforcements were arriving to help with cleanup and reconstruction. The galaxy would never fight the same way again. The question was whether that would make it safer or more dangerous. Either way, humanity would be ready.